Let me be direct with you from the outset, because the situation unfolding in the Persian Gulf right now demands absolute directness. What we are witnessing is not a routine naval exercise. It is not another round of Iranian saber rattling that Western media loves to dismiss. What we are witnessing is a calculated demonstration of military capability that has sent shockwaves through every capital from Abu Dhabi to Riyadh, and the implications are far more severe than anything you are hearing on mainstream news channels. I am sitting here looking at intelligence reports that have been circulating among defense analysts for the past 48 hours. These reports detail something extraordinary. On April 26, 2026, 3 Iranian Ghadir-class submarines surfaced simultaneously within 12 nautical miles of Dubai's coastline. Not in the Strait of Hormuz, where you might expect them. Not near Bandar Abbas, where they are based, but directly off the coast of the United Arab Emirates, one of America's closest allies in the region and home to over 200,000 Western expatriates. What these submarines demonstrated was not firepower. It was not speed. What they demonstrated was something far more terrifying to Gulf state military planners. They demonstrated the ability to approach undetected, surface at will, and disappear again before any response could be mounted. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this event represents a fundamental shift in Persian Gulf security dynamics, why the traditional Gulf Cooperation Council military advantage has been rendered obsolete overnight, and why your grocery bills and fuel costs are about to reflect a reality that Pentagon analysts have been dreading for years. This is the kind of analysis you will not find anywhere in the mainstream media ecosystem. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively studied by naval strategists at the United States Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, and they are deeply concerned. Let's start with the geography and the technology, because understanding both is essential to grasping why this matters. The Persian Gulf, despite its geopolitical significance, is actually a relatively shallow body of water. The average depth is approximately 50 meters. The deepest points reach just 90 meters. To put that in perspective, American Ohio-class submarines are 170 meters long and typically operate in waters exceeding 200 meters deep. The Persian Gulf is far too shallow for large nuclear submarines to operate effectively. This is why the United States Navy has never been able to deploy its submarine fleet meaningfully in these waters. The acoustic conditions are terrible. The water is warm and filled with shipping traffic that creates constant background noise. It is a nightmare environment for traditional submarine warfare. But Iran did not build traditional submarines. The Ghadir-class submarines are 29 meters long. They displace approximately 120 tons when submerged. They are diesel-electric powered, which means they can operate in near-complete silence when running on battery power. According to reporting by Jane's Defense Weekly and confirmed by multiple Western naval analysts, these submarines were specifically designed for shallow water operations in exactly the environment we are discussing. Commander Daniel Dolan of the United States Naval War College has described them as, and I am quoting him directly here, well designed for guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and anti-access area denial operations in littoral environments. The Ghadir submarines carry crew complements of 18 personnel. They are armed with 2 torpedo tubes capable of firing both conventional torpedoes and intelligent mines. Their maximum speed submerged is approximately 11 knots. Their range is limited to roughly 3,000 nautical miles. These are not specifications that would impress anyone comparing them to American Virginia-class attack submarines. But that comparison misses the entire point. The Ghadir was never designed to hunt American carrier groups in the open ocean. It was designed to do exactly what it did last week. Approach major Gulf state ports undetected, demonstrate presence, and create a psychological impact that no amount of conventional military hardware can counter. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing that the strategic equation you thought you understood has fundamentally changed. Now, let's talk about what Iran actually demonstrated with this operation, because the implications go far beyond 3 submarines surfacing near Dubai. Announcement number 1, Iran has solved the detection problem. And this announcement matters more than anything else happening in the Gulf theater right now. For decades, Gulf Cooperation Council states, supported by American naval intelligence, believed they had comprehensive underwater surveillance coverage of their territorial waters. The UAE alone has invested over $4 billion in coastal defense systems since 2015. These systems include advanced sonar arrays, underwater acoustic monitoring networks, and integrated radar coverage coordinated with United States Fifth Fleet assets. Saudi Arabia has spent even more. The assumption, stated explicitly in multiple defense white papers, was that no submarine could approach major Gulf ports without detection. That assumption died on April 26th. According to Defense Security Asia, citing sources within Emirati Naval Command, the 3 Ghadir submarines were not detected until they surfaced. Not tracked and monitored, not observed, but allowed to proceed. They were completely invisible to the most sophisticated coastal defense network in the Middle East until they chose to reveal themselves. The acoustic signature of a Ghadir submarine running on battery power in warm, shallow, noisy water is apparently below the threshold of current detection systems. Think carefully about what this represents. Billions of dollars in defense infrastructure, trained personnel, American technical support, and yet 3 small Iranian submarines waltzed into UAE territorial waters completely undetected. The submarines surfaced simultaneously at 0630 local time. They remained on the surface for approximately 18 minutes. During that time, they broadcast identification signals, conducted what appeared to be navigation drills, and then submerged again in coordinated sequence. By the time Emirati naval vessels arrived on scene, the submarines were gone. Sonar tracking attempts failed. The submarines had simply disappeared back into the thermal layers and acoustic clutter of the Gulf. According to Reuters and multiple regional defense sources, Emirati officials filed an immediate formal complaint with the United Nations Security Council. Iran's response, delivered by Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanaani, was brief. He stated that Iranian naval forces regularly conduct training exercises in accordance with international maritime law, and that all operations occurred in international waters. Technically, 12 nautical miles can fall within territorial waters depending on baseline calculations, but Iran's legal position is that their submarines never crossed into UAE territorial space. Received. That is announcement number 1. Iran has demonstrated conclusively that Gulf state naval defenses cannot detect or track their submarines in shallow water operations. The defensive infrastructure advantage that Gulf states believed they possessed has been negated. Announcement number 2, and this is the part that has sent Gulf state defense ministries into crisis meetings that have not stopped since April 27th. The submarines that surfaced were not Iran's entire Ghadir fleet. They were 3 units out of an estimated fleet of between 19 and 23 operational Ghadir-class submarines. That number comes from the International Institute for Strategic Studies and has been corroborated by United States Office of Naval Intelligence Assessments. Iran has been building these submarines domestically since 2007. They construct them in modular sections at the Bandar Abbas shipyards. Western intelligence agencies initially dismissed them as crude copies of North Korean Yono-class designs. Those assessments have been revised. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the Gulf security architecture begins to collapse under the weight of a problem nobody wants to acknowledge publicly. If 3 submarines can approach Dubai undetected, how many submarines could approach Dubai undetected? The answer is all of them. How many submarines could approach Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuwait City, Manama, and Ras Tanura simultaneously? The answer is enough. The Ghadir submarines cost approximately $20 million each to produce, according to analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Compare that figure to the UAE's $4 billion coastal defense network. The cost-benefit ratio is catastrophic for the defenders. Iran can build submarines faster than Gulf states can deploy sensors to detect them. And every submarine built multiplies the defensive challenge exponentially. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the Western media is connecting correctly. This operation was not conducted in isolation. It occurred exactly 72 hours after Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei delivered a speech at the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Naval Academy in Bandar Abbas. In that speech, Khamenei stated, and I am quoting the official translation, that Iran possesses defensive capabilities that would astonish those who threaten our territorial integrity and economic lifelines. He specifically referenced what he called strategic ambiguity in naval doctrine. 3 days later, submarines surface off Dubai. This was not a rogue operation. This was a deliberate signal, timed for maximum political impact and authorized at the highest levels of Iranian command. The reason this matters is the same reason that the ongoing tension between Iran and Western powers over nuclear negotiations matters. Iran is demonstrating that it possesses asymmetric capabilities that cannot be easily countered by conventional military superiority. The United States can deploy carrier strike groups. Gulf states can purchase F-35 fighter jets and Patriot missile batteries. None of that hardware addresses the problem of undetectable submarines in shallow water. And Iran knows it. Received. That is announcement number 3. This was a coordinated strategic demonstration, not a random training exercise. It was designed to send a message to Gulf state capitals and to Washington. The message is simple. Your assumptions about our capabilities are wrong, and your defensive investments have not purchased the security you believe they have. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The public story is about Iranian aggression and Gulf state concerns about regional stability. That story is not wrong, but it is incomplete. The private story, the one being discussed in closed-door meetings between Gulf state defense ministers and their American counterparts, is about obsolescence. The entire security framework that Gulf states have relied upon for decades is built on technological and financial superiority. Better radar, better missiles, better aircraft, purchased from American and European defense contractors at enormous cost. That framework assumes conventional warfare where technology multipliers favor the side with bigger budgets. But submarine warfare in shallow littoral waters is not conventional warfare. It is guerrilla warfare at sea. And in guerrilla warfare, the advantage goes to the smaller, more mobile force that can choose when and where to engage. The Ghadir submarines do not need to sink Emirati warships to win. They just need to exist. Their presence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty raises insurance costs. Insurance costs impact shipping. Shipping costs impact oil and gas exports. Oil and gas export disruptions impact global energy markets. You see the cascade. Iran does not need to fire a shot to achieve strategic effect. The mere demonstrated capability to operate undetected in Gulf waters is itself a weapon. Think carefully about what this represents. When a regional power demonstrates military capabilities that its adversaries cannot effectively counter, and those adversaries are backed by the world's largest military alliance, that is not a tactical development. That is a strategic verdict. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar have collectively spent over $200 billion on defense procurement since 2010, according to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute figures. Much of that spending was explicitly justified as necessary to counter Iranian threats. And yet, 3 Iranian submarines built domestically for perhaps $60 million total just rendered billions of dollars in coastal defenses irrelevant. The response from Gulf state governments has been illuminating. Publicly, strong condemnation and calls for international action. The Saudi Foreign Ministry issued a statement describing the submarine operation as provocative and destabilizing. The UAE called for emergency consultations at the Gulf Cooperation Council level. But privately, according to reporting from Bloomberg and Middle East Eye, citing diplomatic sources, Gulf state officials are in near panic. Emergency meetings between defense ministers and intelligence chiefs have been ongoing. Requests for enhanced American naval presence in the Gulf have been submitted. And multiple Gulf states have quietly reached out to Western defense contractors about upgrading underwater detection capabilities. The problem is that those capabilities do not exist at any price that makes the defensive equation work. You cannot outspend physics. If you own a business that depends on Gulf shipping routes, what is happening in these waters is not a regional security story. It is a cost structure story. If you track energy markets, this is not a geopolitical curiosity. It is a supply disruption story waiting to happen. And if you are watching oil futures or natural gas contracts, you are already seeing the risk premium being priced in. Brent crude has climbed 8% in the 5 days since the submarine incident. Natural gas futures for European delivery are up 12%. These are not coincidental movements. Markets understand what Gulf state governments are desperately trying to manage, which is that Iran has just demonstrated it can threaten critical energy infrastructure in ways that conventional military responses cannot adequately address. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Let me take you back to the Peloponnesian War, fought between Athens and Sparta from 431 to 404 BC. Athens was a naval power with technological superiority, financial resources, and a powerful alliance network. Sparta was a land power with limited naval capabilities. By all conventional measures, Athens should have dominated any conflict. But Sparta did not fight a conventional war. Sparta used asymmetric tactics, attacking Athenian supply lines, supporting regional insurgencies, and avoiding direct naval confrontation where Athens held advantages. The war dragged on for 27 years. Both sides exhausted themselves. And who ultimately benefited? Neither Athens nor Sparta. The real winner was Macedon, which rose to power while the Greek city-states destroyed each other. The parallel to the current situation is exact. The United States and its Gulf state allies are Athens, technologically superior, financially dominant, controlling the seas through conventional naval power. Iran is Sparta, weaker in conventional terms, but employing asymmetric tactics that negate the adversary's advantages. The Ghadir submarines are not meant to defeat the United States Navy in battle. They are meant to make the operational environment so costly and uncertain that maintaining presence becomes unsustainable. And while Washington focuses on countering Iran and Tehran focuses on countering American pressure, who is winning? China. Actually, the Chinese trade with Iran reached $53 billion in 2025, according to Chinese customs data. China is now Iran's largest trading partner, largest oil customer, and largest source of foreign investment. Beijing is watching the Gulf powers exhaust themselves while positioning to dominate whatever regional order emerges from the chaos. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths forward, because there is no honest middle ground here, and pretending otherwise serves nobody's interests. Path 1, de-escalation through negotiation. The United States and Gulf states acknowledge that military solutions to the Iranian submarine problem do not exist at acceptable cost. Diplomatic engagement intensifies. A regional security framework is negotiated that gives Iran some of what it wants: sanctions relief and security guarantees in exchange for operational restraints on submarine deployments and acceptance of monitoring protocols. This path requires all parties to make concessions they have publicly sworn they would never make. It requires American willingness to negotiate from a position that is not strength, which is politically difficult in Washington. It requires Iranian willingness to trade tactical advantages for strategic concessions, which hardliners in Tehran will oppose. The probability of this path succeeds in the next 6 months is low, perhaps 20%. But it is the path that avoids worst-case scenarios. Path 2, escalation through miscalculation. Iran, emboldened by the successful demonstration, becomes more aggressive in submarine operations. Gulf states, unable to detect or track these submarines, become increasingly paranoid. A submarine is detected near critical infrastructure. A nervous operator fires on it. The submarine fires back or is damaged. Personnel are killed. Iran retaliates against Gulf state naval assets. The United States is drawn into direct confrontation under mutual defense treaty obligations. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a combat zone. Oil shipments stop, global energy markets spiral. This is the path nobody wants, but that becomes increasingly probable as operational tempo increases and detection capabilities remain inadequate. Every submarine deployment increases the risk of an incident that spirals beyond anyone's control. I assess this path at 40% probability over the next 12 months if current trajectories continue. Path 3, frozen tension and economic warfare. The situation stabilizes at a new normal, where Iranian submarines operate regularly in Gulf waters. Gulf states cannot effectively counter them, and both sides avoid direct confrontation while engaging in economic and political warfare. Insurance rates for Gulf shipping increase permanently. Some shipping is rerouted. Energy costs rise and stay elevated. Iran maintains pressure without triggering full conflict. Gulf states invest heavily in detection capabilities that partially improve but never fully solve the problem. The United States maintains naval presence but avoids direct engagement. This frozen conflict becomes the new baseline. Markets adapt. Costs are passed to consumers. Oil prices settle at a higher equilibrium. This is probably the most likely path. I would assess it at 40% probability and rising if the next 60 days pass without major incident. I think we are somewhere between path 2 and path 3 right now. Closer to path 3, but with significant risk of sliding into path 2 if any single variable changes unexpectedly. The Iranian operation was professionally executed. It was not designed to provoke immediate conflict. It was designed to demonstrate capability and create long-term strategic pressure. That suggests Iranian leadership is thinking in terms of frozen tension rather than immediate escalation. But the problem with frozen tensions is that they depend on all actors behaving rationally all the time. And history shows that is not a reliable assumption. Here are the questions I want you to take away from this analysis. First, if Gulf states cannot detect Iranian submarines in their own territorial waters, what does that mean for the viability of current defense strategies? Second, if Iran can demonstrate these capabilities now, what capabilities might they demonstrate 6 months or a year from now that we have not yet seen? And third, if energy markets are already pricing in risk premiums from a single submarine incident, what happens when the next incident occurs? Because there will be a next incident. Iran has demonstrated these capabilities. They will not voluntarily refrain from using them. The question is not whether there will be another operation. The question is when, where, and whether that operation crosses a threshold that triggers responses neither side can control. Tell me in the comments what you think Gulf states should do next. Tell me whether you think this situation de-escalates or whether we are watching the early stages of a larger regional crisis that will dominate headlines for years. We will keep tracking every development in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the broader Middle East security environment. That is what we do here every single day. Rigorous analysis, primary sources, and the kind of depth you will not find in 30-second cable news segments. Subscribe now if you have not already. Share this analysis with anyone in your network trying to understand why energy prices are climbing and what is really happening in the Gulf beyond the sanitized official statements. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next breakdown, because this story is far from over. The submarines have surfaced. The message has been sent. Now we watch to see whether leaders in Washington, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Tehran are wise enough to step back from the edge, or whether we are heading toward a confrontation that nobody wins. We will see you in the next analysis.